welcome to the Higher Ed Matters podcast. I'm Josh Bistromowitz. I'm going to be joined by Tracee Duerson, the Director of Admissions at the Theater School at DePaul University. We're going to kick off this session talking about her professional journey into higher ed.
I think for as many of us know in higher education, we sort of discover it unexpectedly and then end up in this career for a lifetime, which is kind of amazing. So like many of us in the field, I was involved in my undergrad and worked in the Educational Opportunity Program office. And that was my aha light bulb moment, like, wow, I can do this for real. How fun. And so my early career really started out mostly in working in college access programs and essentially really encouraging students to apply for college, ensure they were getting financial aid, navigating that whole process. And so I worked with a couple of different nonprofits and was placed first in a high school and navigating, again, that entire process with high school students. And then from there, I decided I really love this, so I should probably go to grad school. So I went to New York and pursued my master's degree in higher education and student affairs administration. And at that time, also did a grad assistantship in the higher education opportunity programs office. So shifted from working with students in California to working with students in New York City. And it was really interesting in that, NYU is literally in their, backyards. But for many students, going to NYU was not even really a thought because of just the sheer cost of it and, navigating this very prestigious private institution in their city. And so being able to be in that recruitment world and helping them navigate the cost and scholarships and do I stay local, do I go? All of that was just really fascinating. And part of my job was to do a summer bridge program with them to make sure that they were feeling more academically prepared. And so that was really sort of my big intro into this is what college admissions is or recruitment. And it sealed the deal for me, for sure. And what I learned in that program and working with those students was just incredible and just had my heart. So after that, I went back to California, which is where I was originally from, and I worked within my undergrad institution for the Student Support Services program, which is a TRIO program. And so instead of doing the recruitment side of it, I was, working with them as they were deciding to come to Cal Poly. And then it was a lot of academic advising and event planning and really essentially student retention programs, right? So, again, navigating that financial aid process, navigating support services, all of that. And I did that for a few years, and then I made a switch to admissions. So not necessarily the path that always happens for those of us who've been in admissions for a long time, but I'd always been admissions involved and admissions adjacent. And so I took an opportunity to work in the regional admissions world for two different institutions and got to travel all over California, pulling in students. That's how I got involved in admissions in the performing arts. And then from there, moved to Chicago and became the director of admissions for the theater school at DePaul University, which I've been here for about 7 years now and loving every minute of it. Even through everything we've been going through the last few years, it's been a very incredible, interesting, challenging, very heartwarming journey.
Absolutely. It's so funny. I think when I was on your side of the desk, every year, you're in those meetings where you're reporting your numbers and what numbers are going to look like for the year. And every year I felt like it was well, this class didn't behave like the last 10 classes. And it was almost, it became a joke that every year, we were no longer relying on, the historical data that's going to say, if you increase your inquiries, if you do this, then you're going to get more students. And that basic formula has just kind of shifted so drastically. And that's really, admissions as a whole has really changed so much over the course of, the last 10, 15, 20 years. What are some of the biggest things that you've seen in terms of change across institutions, across time?
Yes. I mean, so much has changed in the last 10 to 15 years, and that's pandemic aside, right? I mean,
Right?
that has propelled us in a different direction once again. But while there is a lot of predictability in admissions and data and year over year reports that we can look at, I think at the core of it, what has not changed, to be honest with you, is just that human to human component of it, right? That maybe once upon a time it was much more about the numbers game and we could rely on that more steadily. But now I think students are really counting on us engaging with them on a very personal level throughout their journey. And so, it's fun to think back on the different types of parenting styles that we've had to navigate in our approaches. Looking at even higher level umbrella political matters that we face, just in looking at different ways that affirmative action has impacted our process, looking at how anti-racism has come to the forefront and impacted what we do and how we navigate the admissions funnel and cycle. Looking at um, the how proportions have changed in male identifying versus female identifying students and how they're enrolling. It's just been a wild ride that keeps us on our toes, which is why I think that this is such an interesting and fascinating field to be in, because again, like, some of it comes down to numbers, but the industry has just changed as education, higher education, professional access, expectations for an undergrad versus a grad degree. All of it is really has really impacted and changed our field and our industry, and in a lot of good ways, because it's pushed us to do better, right? And to really call into question who we are, what we do, and what we want the future to look like.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think at the truth, kind of what you mentioned earlier, is I love that access is still such a core portion. Higher ed is had a lot, it's been brought into question a good bit. And I think the pandemic didn't help in terms of, saying what is the value of a college education? And what do you think is probably one of the greatest threats for our industry, for higher education as a whole?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm a true believer in higher education and its power. And so I don't actually think higher education is going anywhere. I just think that it's time for us to answer the question of how do we change and evolve for now and the future. And so, question of cost and value is it's complicated because higher education is very expensive in some realms, right? There are ways to make it less expensive, but it may limit options for students. And I don't think anybody should be pigeonholed into you must to only go to community college and or your state school because that's the only way you can afford it, if that might not be the right fit for them. For many people, as a product of state education and private education, there, it depends on what works for you and who you are and what your future beholds. But the cost is can be very prohibitive if we are not looking again at access for all, right? And so when we think about this in on a larger scale, and I'm a first generation college student, and so I was very much the person by my parents said you must go to college, but you must go in state. It must be this amount, and this is what we can afford, and that's the end of your story, right? And I had an amazing education. I was very lucky, but if the system as a whole, if we can get better at looking at the systemic changes that need to occur to create equity
Mhm.
in relationship to access, I think that is going to help us reconcile the cost, right? At some point, the cost is going to be too prohibitive if we're not looking at these underlying, factors. So, in thinking about this, students who have had little to no economic barriers in their lifetime, college is expensive, right? But they have a different access to it than a student who might be first generation or has always come from a lower income or just middle income background, right? It doesn't even have to be low income. Middle income, two working parents still struggle with the cost of some
Sure.
education because even though they can get loans in their FAFSA and take out this $28,000 a year in a Parent Plus loan, that doesn't mean they can do that. We don't know what potentially is prohibiting that from happening, and we don't want it to be a choice of I put my parents into $100,000 worth of debt and cause complications for their lifetime so they can go to school, or I go to other school that can essentially we can pay for out of pocket. And so, in looking at equity, right, we need to look at the population of people that this affects the most. And so we start with, you know, always asking the question like, as simple as is it easy enough to fill out a form? How do I navigate understanding the FAFSA? What is debt going to actually look like for me? What's my return on investment? How long will it take me to pay back these loans, right? Am I going to be prohibited from obtaining economic growth and success in my own life because I am just downtrodden by debt forever that then my kids may inherit? These are all questions that if we center that in our discussions, I believe that that's where higher education is. We need to take a step back and talk about this more seriously than we even are now, because I would love to continue to give scholarships to my students who are come from strong economic backgrounds, right? Because I think academic achievement is very important. But if we can create a system in which, maybe education is not free because there's complications with that as well, but if maybe it's not free for our students who need access and equity, but it is not cost prohibitive, right? There are ways and structures and programs more than what we can offer now that make it so that they can thrive, succeed, not worry about should I pay rent, you know, buy groceries this month, work 40 hours instead of 20 so that I'm not doing well in my classes? Or can I go to college, have my part-time work, feel fully fulfilled by this degree in education and still be able to, come out on the other end without all of these worries?
I think that you're onto something that not many people are talking about. We in the news we're hearing about making community college free, and other options, loan forgiveness, and just wiping out debt. And I don't know that those are the best options. And I don't know that they're the right conversations to be having. Access should mean access. It should mean that you have the ability of getting a great education and having those experiences, right? Having this passion that we do for higher education and really for admissions. I think that's one thing that has really just broken my heart recently. I was reading in an article about how higher education is the number one I guess, industry that is seeing the greatest impact from the Great Resignation. And I mean, I've seen it from, former teams of mine, and I've seen admissions offices that have completely been broken up, and people that are choosing to leave this industry and this profession. And it breaks my heart because I know what talent that they are bringing to their college or their university. And have you seen similar situations?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happened over the last few years. And I've been thinking about this a lot in that. So we don't choose higher education to make a lot of money. Let's be honest, right? There are people maybe in certain roles that do quite well, but most of us in the roles that we fulfill are not making a lot of money. And so I think some people have reached a point in their careers where they feel like, wow, if I make a switch to the corporate world, I'm going to do something similar, probably work less hours and make a lot more money than I'm working now, right? And that's fine and that's fair. What I am also hearing though is that people that I know or know of that left, really as a result of this great resignation and the pandemic, are now looking to come back. And so that speaks volumes about really appreciating having a job that you're happy being a part of, right? And that's not to say, I mean, in similar ways to what you've been reading in higher education, I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this will have seen this same information, right? But we are being asked to work more than we ever have for less money than we ever have. Progress in higher education is slower than any other industry, probably. I don't have proof on that, but I've lived it, right? It takes us 3 times as long to accomplish anything. And, for better, for worse, the bureaucratic structures that we're navigating. But also it means that progress is thoughtful. And so I think that that's something that we need to step back sometimes and remind ourselves that we're not implementing change left and right all the time, because we need to really think about what that long-term effect is going to be and maybe test the waters a little bit to see if it is going to be effective. So yes, it's hard to see people leaving, but I am really inspired by in hearing that people are looking at coming back, and I think with new eyes, right? Of here are things I took away from where I went from here, and here's why I returned. And those of us that stay in this industry, do it because we love the humans that we work with, right? I mean, it's such a humanitarian, um, focused field, and that's why I get up every day and love my job, right? Even on hard days, I know that the students I work with are amazing. The faculty and staff that I get to work with are amazing, because we all have this greater good in mind of like, we are here to help cultivate this next generation of learners, and hopefully they'll come back and, remind us why we're doing it in the future. Like, thank you all, you were right.
That's why we do it. That's like, that's, they're not always, again, you're not going to come in every day changing a student's life, but it's those moments that you can look back on and said, you know what? I changed one. I helped in the process for one. What more do you want? Like, obviously there's a lot more you could want, but
No, but yes and no, right? Because it's
yeah.
those hugs and those moments of small gratitude, or graduation, and like, thank you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been here in the first place. And we are admissions people, so it's what we do for our jobs. We're like, yeah, of course, I'm happy to work with you through the admissions process and to commit you. But we forget that was literally a life-changing impact that we had on them because of the role that we played. And I work remotely, and I was, as and I was on campus a few weeks ago for our open house event, and one of my students who's a current first year gave me the biggest, longest bear hug of my life, just saying like, I wouldn't be here without you. And they have quite a story, and they got admitted at the very last minute, and I found them housing 2 days before they had to move in, and just all of the little tiny things that for us is not a big deal, but for them really change their lives. I was just, I don't know, it's those things that keep us going. And like you said, I can come in on a day and be a little cranky, and all I have to do is connect with one student. Like, that's why I'm here. It's you right there.
That's exactly it. That's exactly, and that's, to bring it full circle. That's why higher ed isn't going to go anywhere. I mean, it's. I think people like yourself, that they're doing the hard work, they're doing the good work, but at the end of the day, yes, metrics, we can look at the return on investment and how much your college degree is costing and how long it's going to take you to pay it back. But what is the value behind that, right? Like, how do you put a price tag on the value that this will truly, if you allow it, will change everything?
Absolutely. I've said again for my whole career that college is the best investment you can possibly make, right? If you're going to live it to the fullest, make it as fulfilling as it possibly can be, it is really truly the best investment because it's your brain, it's your heart, and those things you get to hold on to, right? Your car is not going to be that cool in 20 years, maybe some cars, but when you're in college, right, you are learning how to be a deep thinker. You're learning how to have conversations. What I think about a lot is that social media, for better or for worse, has given students the opportunity to hide behind a screen. But being in a college classroom, you cannot do that, right? So now you have to be learning tactics and ways to navigate difficult conversations with people who are very different from yourself, and background that you can't even begin to imagine what it looks like. And you can still be in a room together and you can facilitate a relationship of some sort. And that's not something you get easily, right? That's very unique to a higher education setting because you're actually intentionally supposed to be there to do that, to have those conversations and become a deep thinker and learn about people and view the world from different perspectives. And so, that's something that, again, one more reason of many why higher education is going to stick. So yeah, we're going to evolve and change, and we have some reckoning to do, but if that continues to be the core of why we are encouraging students to be, to attend an institution and be part of this system and process, that's really at the core of it, in my opinion.
I could not agree more. Is there anything else that you just say, I cannot leave here? I cannot leave this podcast without mentioning?
I think the only other thing I want to mention is that, for those of us who have been in the field for a long time and are leaders and moving into more, I guess, leadership roles, I think what I hope is that we will take on the role of really mentoring people coming up in the field as, um, the next generation of leaders, right? So, yeah, we have experience. We've been around for a little while. We've seen some things. We've navigated different roles within the profession. But I believe that every day I can and do learn something new.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, part of what keeps me so interested and invested in this field. And I now view my role. Sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, am I old enough to like be mentoring people? But yeah, I am, right? Like, I've been around for a minute. And so I just think that as I enter into this sort of middle phase of my professional journey, and I really feel passionately about inspiring women, especially women, but really people, just humans, to again take on these roles, to really ask for what they want, to not be afraid to try different things, to speak up. I think, like, we've lived in a world of higher education for a long time, and I feel like that's what I've sort of been brought up in, that I look up and there's a lot of white male leaders, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I am hoping that we really get to a time as my generation of people in the field can continue to push for more diversity in who we're hiring. And so, yeah, I just think, like, as leaders, it's really our job to facilitate that mentorship and encouragement, and also be very collaborative in knowing that we are learning from each other. Wherever we are in our career, we all have something to learn from each other, and that's how we make this institution even better.
Mhm, mhm. Again, I couldn't agree more. No surprise there. I think that's what's different with our generation within kind of admissions is where, when I started off as a road runner, it was very much the director, or it's the vision of the director or the VP or whatever the situation may be. And I feel as though our generation, to a certain extent, really has a collaborative approach. It isn't I know everything and my way it's either my way or the highway. It's bringing in the team to say, I don't know everything. I am just kind of spitballing here and throwing things on the wall. It's going to see what sticks sometimes. And you need that, or at least I did. I needed that support of my team to say, am I crazy? Is like just me thinking of this and having that collaborative approach? And ensuring that your team has the skills to be able to take over. Because at the end of the day, I said, like, I hope to stay forever, but that's not a realistic view. And so, and I always said, I want you to be able to continue not just my vision, but your vision. I want you to be able to step into it and have the tools that I didn't have as a new director of admissions, to where I was literally trying to figure out on the fly. I want them to have the tools and to be able to step into success and miss maybe some of those potholes that I could have avoided had I had a mentor that could have walked me through a little bit better.
Absolutely.
Well, Tracee, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.